Emily Parker stepped out of her small gray house on Mapleview Lane just as the sun dipped low behind the tall oak trees. She had always liked this time of day. It made everything feel softer, quieter, almost peaceful. But lately, even the calm evenings couldn't stop her thoughts from circling back to the heartbreak she was trying so hard to move on from. Today felt no different till she sensed someone watching her. She placed the last grocery bag into the trunk and shut it gently. The moment the sound echoed, she noticed a pair of footsteps approaching from the sidewalk. Mapleview Lane rarely had visitors at this hour. Most neighbors were inside making dinner or relaxing after long workdays. The whole street had a predictable rhythm one. She had learned well in the last year she lived there. But the man walking toward her wasn't part of that rhythm. He was tall, with calm blue eyes that carried a kind of quiet sadness. His dark brown hair moved slightly in the breeze. And there was something familiar about his face, though Emily couldn't place it. He slowed down when he reached the edge of her driveway, looking unsure if he should get any closer. "Hi," he said, offering a soft, careful smile. "I'm Mark, Claire's brother." Emily blinked. Claire Thompson, her next-door neighbor. One of the warmest people on the street, always checking in, always offering help, always chatting about something funny that happened in her classroom. But Claire had never once mentioned she had a brother. Emily found herself surprised, curious, and a little thrown off. "Oh," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I didn't know Claire had family visiting." He nodded. "I usually come by without warning. And I stay quiet. Not really the type to move around the house much." That explained why Emily had never seen him before. She had heard the faint sound of footsteps in Claire's hallway late at night a few times. But she assumed it was Claire herself or a friend calling. Now it made sense. Still, something about the way he looked at her made her believe there was more to why he approached. "I hope it's okay. I came over," he added quickly. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," she said, though her voice came out more cautious than she intended. She wasn't used to strangers walking directly into her space. But something about Mark's tone felt gentle, not intrusive. He took a small breath, like he was preparing himself. "I wanted to talk because I think I owe you an apology." Emily's heart skipped. An apology for what? She didn't even know him. "I don't understand," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mark looked at the driveway, then back at her, as if searching for words that wouldn't overwhelm her. "A few weeks ago," he began, "I came back to Claire's house really late. It must have been close to midnight. I was heading inside when I heard someone crying. I didn't want to intrude, but the porch light from your house was on, and I could hear you. You sounded hurt. Not physically hurt, just heartbroken." Lee froze. She remembered that night too clearly. It was the night everything felt like it finally cracked open inside her. She had gone outside because she didn't want the walls of her house to make her feel trapped in her pain. Her breakup had been messy emotionally, not physically. She kept telling herself she was fine, that she was healing, but that night her heart had betrayed her. Tears had come out before she could hold them back, and she had let them fall in the darkness because no one was around. Or so she thought. "I'm sorry you heard that," she whispered, suddenly feeling exposed. "No," he said quickly. "I'm the one who's sorry. I didn't mean to listen, and I didn't mean to carry that moment with me. But I did. And I felt bad because I could hear how much you were hurting, and I didn't even ask Claire if you were okay. I just stayed quiet." Emily didn't know what to say. She wasn't angry. It was more the shock of being reminded of a moment she wished nobody had witnessed. But the way Mark spoke carefully, almost apologetic without being dramatic, made her feel something unexpected. "Understood. How did you know it was because of my ex?" she asked gently. Mark shifted his weight. "Claire mentioned something earlier today. She said he tried reaching out to you again, and she was worried you might get pulled back into something painful." Emily looked down at her shoes, trying to hide the tension rising in her chest. Her ex, Jason, had indeed tried contacting her twice in the last week. She ignored him both times, but the messages still echoed in her mind. "We should talk. I think we made a mistake." She didn't want to go down that road again. "Claire's just being protective," Emily said softly. She doesn't want me to get hurt again." "I don't want that either," Mark said, surprising her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind brushed through the driveway, carrying the faint smell of pine trees from the nearby woods. Emily noticed how Mark stood not too close, not too far, giving her space while still making her feel like someone cared. He had the look of a man who carried his own quiet heaviness. She could see it in the way his shoulders slightly drooped, in the pause between his breaths, in the softness in his eyes. "I know what heartbreak sounds like," he said quietly. "I recognized it because I've been there too. Maybe not the same way, but close." Emily found herself wanting to ask him more, wanting to understand the story behind those tired, honest eyes. But before she could gather the courage to speak, Claire's voice suddenly broke through the moment. "Mark, dinner's ready." She called from her front porch, cheerful and unaware. Mark gave Emily a small, almost hesitant smile. "I didn't mean to keep you. I just wanted you to know someone heard you and someone understood." Emily nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." He turned to leave but paused. "If you ever want to talk, I'm around." And with that, he walked back toward Claire's house, leaving Emily standing in her driveway with a strange mix of calm, curiosity, and a flutter she didn't want to name. Just yet, she watched him disappear through the front door. Something about him stayed with her. Something gentle. Something honest. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Emily didn't expect to see Mark again that night. After he walked back into Claire's house, she tried to return to her evening routine. But her thoughts kept drifting to the calm, steady way he spoke. There was something unusual about a stranger apologizing for overhearing her sadness. Most people ignored those moments or pretended not to notice. But Mark had carried it with him, quietly, respectfully, without judgment. And that lingered with her more than his actual words. She tried distracting herself by checking her messages, making a cup of tea, and walking around her living room. None of it worked. Her thoughts kept circling back to the driveway, to the soft expression in his eyes, and to the surprising warmth she felt talking to someone she had just met. Just as she settled on her couch, her phone buzzed again. Her ex's name flashed across the screen. The familiar contact photo she once loved, now feeling like a weight pressing against her chest. Emily locked the phone without opening the message. She didn't want to think about him tonight. She didn't want to fall back into old habits or old hurts. She stepped outside to get some fresh air. The night sky had fully darkened, but the street remained peaceful. Porch lights glowed softly along the houses, and a cool breeze brushed across her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, unsure if the chill she felt came from the night air or from the uncertainty inside her. Then she heard a door open from next door. She turned her head gently, and there he was. Again, Nark stepped onto Claire's porch, holding a glass of water. When he saw Emily sitting outside, he paused, as if deciding whether he should interrupt her. But she offered a small, polite smile. It was enough. He walked over slowly, making sure not to startle her. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, it's okay." He sat on the bottom step of her porch, leaving a comfortable space between them. He didn't look at her right away. He focused on the quiet street, the glowing windows, the soft wind moving the leaves. It made the moment feel calm instead of awkward. "You didn't have to come back out," Emily said, her voice gentle but unsure. "I wasn't planning to," he admitted, "but I wasn't really hungry. And I couldn't stop thinking that maybe I said too much earlier." "You didn't," she assured him quickly. "You were honest. I appreciate that." He glanced at her then with a look that carried gratitude and something softer. Most people don't like strangers noticing their bad moments. Emily lowered her gaze. "I guess I'm not used to people caring at all. So it threw me off." Mark nodded. "I get that." There was a quiet understanding between them, something that didn't need extra explanation. Maybe it was the shared experience of loss. Maybe it was the simplicity of being two people who had been hurt before and didn't want to pretend anymore. Mark shifted slightly. "I wasn't lying earlier. When I said I recognized that pain, I meant it." Emily looked at him, waiting for him to continue if he wanted to. He took a slow breath. 2 years ago, I went through something similar. I thought I had everything figured out. I was married, had a house, had plans. And then one day, all of it just ended. Not suddenly, but slowly, in ways I didn't see coming. She drifted away. I tried to hold us together, but you can't fix a relationship alone. Eventually, she said she wasn't happy anymore. There was no bitterness in his voice, only quiet acceptance. Emily felt a heaviness in her heart. Not from sadness, but from knowing exactly what that kind of loss felt like. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Life happens," he replied. But the small shake in his voice revealed that it hadn't been easy to move past. I stayed with Claire for a while after the divorce. I didn't want to be alone. Most days, I didn't even know what I was supposed to feel. Just empty. Emily turned toward him slightly. "That's exactly how I felt." Mark gave a small nod, like her words confirmed something he already suspected. "Claire told me a little about what happened with your ex. Not details, just enough to know he didn't treat you the way you deserved." Emily felt her stomach tighten. She didn't want to talk about Jason, not in a way that made her look weak. But something about Mark made honesty easier. "It ended because we weren't the same people anymore," she said quietly. "I tried to make it work longer than I should have. I ignored the signs. And when he finally left, it felt like everything I gave didn't matter." "That hurts the most," Mark said gently. "Giving your best and realizing it wasn't enough for someone." Emily swallowed hard, the memories coming back sharper than expected. She had spent months trying to rebuild herself, but the smallest reminder could still open the cracks. The wind picked up for a moment, brushing her hair over her shoulder. Mark noticed, but instead of reaching out or making a romantic gesture, he simply waited, allowing her to speak only if she wanted to. "There's something else," he added softly. "I didn't come over earlier because Claire asked me to. I came because when she mentioned he'd tried to reach out again, I didn't want you to think you were facing that fear alone." Emily felt a warmth spread in her chest, gentle, comforting, unexpected. "Why would you care?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. He looked at her with a steady, sincere expression. "Because sometimes it takes just one person to remind you that you're not invisible, that your feelings matter." Her breath hitched not from romance, not from attraction, but from the kind of understanding she had longed for. Before she could respond, she noticed a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, like he wanted to say more but didn't want to overwhelm her. "Emily," he said calmly, "you don't know me, and I don't expect anything from you. But I want you to know something real. You didn't sound broken that night. You sounded like someone who held everything together for too long." His words struck deep, not painfully, but truthfully. She didn't realize her shoulders had relaxed until she took a long breath, for the first time in months. She didn't feel alone on her porch. She felt seen. The moment stretched quietly between them, till Claire's laughter drifted faintly from next door, reminding them of the world beyond this fragile bubble. Emily looked at him with a softer expression. "Thank you, Mark." "Really?" He nodded, stood slowly, and gave her the smallest, warmest smile. "I'm around if you ever want to talk again," he said. Then he walked back toward Claire's house, leaving Emily watching the gentle swing of the porch light behind him, wondering why a stranger's honesty felt more comforting than any familiar promise she once believed. Emily didn't plan to sit outside again later that night, but something about the quiet air made her step onto the porch once more. The sky was darker now, sprinkled with faint stars. The street felt still, like it was holding secrets it didn't want to speak aloud. She wrapped her thin sweater around her shoulders and sat on the steps, hoping the fresh air would clear her thoughts. She wasn't waiting for Mark, but she couldn't ignore the small hope inside her that wished he might come back. She told herself it wasn't about him, just about having someone to talk to who didn't judge her or expect anything from her. Still, she couldn't lie to herself. There was something calming about him. Minutes passed quietly. It's a kind of long silence that made her thoughts wander too much. She almost went back inside when she heard footsteps near the side of her yard. She turned quickly and saw Mark walking toward her again. He wasn't smiling, but but he wasn't tense either. His presence felt calm, steady, like a warm breath in a cold room. He stopped at the end of her porch steps. "Is it okay if I sit with you?" he asked. She nodded. Of course. He sat beside her, leaving just the right amount of space, close enough to talk, far enough to keep everything respectful. There was something about the way he moved, as if he was always making sure he didn't intrude. "You're out here again?" he said gently. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, thinking too much. He exhaled slowly. "I know that feeling." For a moment, they watched the dark houses across the street. The porch lights glowed softly, and the wind rustled through the trees. Emily felt strangely relaxed, even though she barely knew him. "What made you come back out?" she asked quietly. He shrugged a little. "Couldn't sleep either. I kept thinking about our conversation and how much it probably took for you to share all that." "I didn't share much," she said. "You've shared more than you think," he replied. "And you didn't have to." Emily looked at him. His expression wasn't intense or dramatic. It was simply sincere. That sincerity made it easier to open up, easier to breathe. "I don't like talking about my past," she admitted. "But with you, it didn't feel heavy." Mark glanced down at the steps. "Maybe that's because we both know what it's like to hold too much on our own." Emily didn't answer, but she felt it. Felt the truth in his words. They didn't know each other well, but they understood each other in ways that felt strangely familiar. He leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. His voice grew steadier, like he was finally ready to share the part he held back earlier. "I didn't tell you the whole story about my marriage," Kay began. Emily stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I tried keeping us together long after it was clear she didn't want to stay," he said. "Every day felt like trying to catch something already slipping through my fingers. I thought if I changed myself, if I worked harder, or talked more, or talked less, something would fix." Emily listened closely. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a tired truth. "She eventually told me she didn't love me anymore," he continued, "and she had been feeling that way long before she said it." Emily felt her heart ache for him, not romantically, but empathetically. She knew the pain of staying too long, giving too much, and still losing everything. "That must have been hard," she whispered. "It was," he said simply. "But sometimes the hardest part isn't losing the person. It's losing the version of yourself you were with them." Emily knew that feeling deeply. When Jason left, she didn't just lose him. She lost the version of herself who believed she was enough for someone. Mark turned to look at her. His eyes were gentle but tired. It's like someone who had lived through storms and still found a calm way to stand in the rain. "That night I heard you crying," he said softly. "I knew exactly what that sound meant. Not weakness, not drama, just someone carrying too much for too long." Emily swallowed, the truth landing quietly inside her. And when Claire mentioned he reached out again, he added, "I didn't want you to think you were facing that old pain alone." Emily felt a warm, slow shift inside her chest. Not love, not attraction. Something quieter, trust. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." The air between them felt softer now, like something delicate was forming, fragile, but real. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You talk like someone who's been thinking about all this for a long time." "I have," he admitted. "But tonight, I think I finally talked to the right person about it." Emily felt her cheeks warm, not from anything flirtatious, just from the sincerity in his voice. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach out. But the way he looked at her felt like a small, honest moment of connection. After a while, the conversation drifted to lighter things, where they grew up, what they liked about Mapleview Lane, silly stories about Claire's cooking attempts and Mark's terrible luck with home projects. They laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that felt easy and natural. But the moment didn't last long. Headlights appeared far down the road, slowly approaching. Emily didn't think much of it until the car slowed as it reached her house. Her heart tightened. Mark noticed the sudden change in her breathing. "Everything okay?" The car stopped near her driveway. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look at the screen. She knew the name before she saw it. Jason. Her ex. He wasn't calling this time. He was here. Emily felt her chest tighten as the car engine shut off. Mark straightened slightly, watching her face, not the car. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't know what she wanted. Fear mixed with anger, with confusion, with the fragile calm she had just built. The car door opened. Jason stepped out, looking at her like nothing bad had ever happened between them. Emily's fingers trembled slightly. Mark didn't move closer, didn't stand, didn't act protective. He simply waited for her answer. "You don't have to talk to him alone," he said softly. "Only if you want to." Emily felt an unfamiliar strength rise inside her. Maybe this time, she wasn't going to face the past the same way she once did. The headlights of Jason's car lingered on the driveway, cutting through the quiet night with an unsettling presence. Emily's chest tightened, her fingers brushing against the porch railing, as if she could anchor herself to something solid. She felt the tension of the moment's years of heartbreak, fear, and hesitation converging in one instant. And yet, beside her, Mark remained calm, silent, giving her space but ready if she needed him. His presence wasn't overwhelming. It was reassuring, like a steady hand in a storm. Jason stepped out of the car, adjusting his jacket as if preparing for a casual conversation. But Emily could see the subtle tension in his movements. He tried that familiar, charming expression that had once drawn her in, the one she had fallen for despite all the red flags. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I just wanted to talk." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the knot in her stomach tighten. She didn't want confrontation, and she didn't want to repeat old mistakes. But she also didn't want to run. She looked at Mark, whose blue eyes met hers with a quiet understanding, silently letting her know she wasn't alone. That small reassurance gave her courage. "No," she said firmly, her voice steady. "You can't just come here and expect everything to be okay." Jason blinked, taken aback by the sudden firmness in her tone. He shifted his weight, trying to recover some control of the situation. We need to talk. I think we made a mistake." Emily shook her head slowly. "No, we didn't make a mistake. We made choices, and some of those choices hurt me. I've spent months picking up the pieces, and I'm not going to let you undo that by showing up unannounced." Jason hesitated, clearly not expecting such confidence. He took a step closer, trying to soften his tone. "Can we at least talk tomorrow?" Emily glanced at Mark again. He didn't move, didn't intervene, but his steady gaze encouraged her. She realized she didn't have to go back to old habits or let fear control her. She had control now. She had the right to set boundaries. "I need peace, Jason," she said quietly, but firmly, "and I'm choosing to protect that. So please, don't come here again." Jason stood frozen for a moment, processing her words. Her calmness, her newfound strength that surprised him. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then slowly closed it, his expression softening slightly, but leaving a faint trace of regret. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. The engine roared to life, and the taillights disappeared down the street. Emily exhaled, a shaky breath that felt like both relief and release. The tension that had weighed on her all evening began to lift. She realized that for the first time in a long time, she had faced her past without fear, without clinging to what used to be. She had drawn a line and owned her peace. Mark finally moved slightly closer, not touching her, just enough for her to notice his supportive presence. "You were strong tonight," he said softly, his voice low, sincere. Emily's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes still glistened with lingering emotion. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice quieter now. More honest than she had been with anyone in a long time. "Everyone is," he replied, a gentle warmth in his tone. "But you don't have to face any of it alone. Not now, not ever." Her chest warmed at his words. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It wasn't dramatic or over the top. It was quiet, steady, and respectful, the kind of support that felt real and lasting. Emily realized she had been longing for this kind of presence, someone who could see her pain without trying to fix it. Someone who could be there while letting her find her own strength for a while. They just sat on the porch steps, watching the street fall silent again. The night was calm, punctuated only by the distant hum of cars and the rustle of leaves in the trees. Emily let herself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in months. The fear of being hurt again seemed smaller, almost manageable. The heaviness that had followed her since Jason's departure felt lighter now, carried away on the cool night air. Mark spoke again, softly, almost as if afraid to break the fragile peace. You know, it's not just about letting go of him. It's about allowing yourself to start something new. You don't have to rush, and you don't have to figure it all out tonight. But letting someone in, even slowly, can help. Emily turned toward him, surprised by the care in his words. She hadn't expected to hear advice or encouragement from a neighbor she barely knew. Yet here it was, simple and honest. She realized that she wasn't ready to rush into anything. But for the first time, she felt open to the idea of trust again. She felt capable of letting someone close without fear of being broken, I think. "I understand," she said softly, her voice tinged with hope. "I don't know what the future holds, but tonight, I feel like I can breathe again." Mark nodded, a quiet smile playing at his lips. That's all anyone can ask for. One step at a time. They sat in comfortable silence after that, each lost in thought, each feeling the subtle shift of connection between them. It wasn't love yet. It wasn't even attraction in the traditional sense. But it was something deeper: understanding, respect, and emotional intimacy. Something that had been missing from Emily's life for too long. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant rain. Emily felt a flicker of anticipation, not the rush of infatuation, but a soft, patient excitement. A sense that maybe, just maybe, life could hold something gentle and healing after the storms. Finally, Mark stood, giving her a respectful nod. "I should head back. Claire will wonder where I am." Emily rose as well, feeling a quiet strength within her. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for listening, for being here." He smiled one last time, and it wasn't the kind of smile that demanded a response. It was a warm, steady smile that promised presence, patience, and sincerity. "Anytime, Emily. That's what neighbors or friends are for." As he walked back toward Claire's house, Emily stayed on the porch for a few more moments, feeling the peace settle around her. The street was quiet again, the stars twinkling above. The night no longer felt heavy or intimidating. Instead, it felt alive with possibility. She realized that the driveway, the porch, the quiet night, everything that had felt like a moment of vulnerability had become a place of renewal. Emily exhaled one last time and whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the start of something real." For the first time in months, she didn't feel broken. She felt ready to heal, ready to trust, and ready to welcome the gentle, quiet possibility of someone who truly understood her, the unexpected encounter that had begun with an apology and a shared moment of heartbreak had transformed into something far more meaningful. A connection built on respect, care, and emotional honesty. And Emily knew, deep in her heart, that this story was just beginning, with room to grow, to heal, and to blossom in its own time. The porch light glowed softly around them, a quiet witness to the night's events, and Emily felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She had faced her past, stood her ground, and found someone beside her who wasn't rushing, who wasn't demanding, and who simply understood. For the first time, the night felt like a beginning, not an ending.